Welcome. I'm Jane Hansen. This week in the arena, finding help in hard times. As the economy spirals deeper into recession, more people are in need. What can the church do? This week, we're going to look for some ideas and answers. It's no secret the economy is in crisis, with foreclosures multiplying, unemployment and inflation climbing, banks crumbling. A growing number of Americans are looking for help, and many are turning to the church, not just for spiritual support. To discuss all of this, I am joined by Father Harrington, Vicar of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn, Jay Akasie, a freelance reporter and contributor to The Tablet, and Elizabeth Scalia, contributor to Inside Catholic and curator of the blog known as The Anchoress. Welcome to all of you. It's a tough subject, one we're all worried about. Jay, I know you've been doing a series of reports that are about to be published in The Tablet, taking a look really at the effect on the Diocese of Brooklyn and what's happening. What have you discovered so far?
Well, I've discovered that besides the obvious effects of the economic downturn on what is a very large institution with lots of different agencies that depend on a healthy economic environment, that the parishes that make up the lifeblood of the diocese are hurting as well. Really the folks on the ground, so to speak.
Meaning that they're having trouble paying basic bills, such things as the light, fuel, all sorts of things that one may not even think about when it comes to religion?
Right. It would seem to me that you were talking about how people are turning to the church for help. In some ways, these parishes now are looking to their parishioners for help now more than ever to help out with some of the basic things that a lot of parishioners take for granted.
But I would expect, Father, that for people who want to be able to give their fair share in the weekly collection plate, they're having a tough time doing that.
You would imagine when people see that their 401k, the stock market has declined 54%, and people, many of our parishioners who are in their late 50s or 60s or 70s, they're looking at their retirement. All of a sudden, they see a decline of 40, 50, 60% valuation. That's got to be a real concern. But I would bet you that people in these economic crises and these economic downturns, they're also conscious of the suffering of their neighbor. And so I think that spurs them on to be even more generous.
Well, one of the things that I think people may not realize is the lifeline that the church can provide, such as all kinds of programs that help with mortgages, That's right. For example.
Catholic Charities has done a great job to help people identify when they're in trouble with their mortgage. They start to fall behind, maybe a month behind. They go to Catholic Charities, working with the New York Times and the Neediest Case Fund, has been able to help people get over those rough patches. Also to sort of renegotiate, kind of put them in touch with the people who can help renegotiate the mortgages. You saw this week there was an article in the New York Times speaking about how renegotiating the principal of mortgages right now, because the appreciation of houses, the housing prices has been so great that maybe what you need to do is not just renegotiate the interest rate, but renegotiate the principal as well on the house. Mm-hmm. So Catholic Charities is helping people not only pay their bills, pay their utilities, pay their mortgage, but they're also helping people be identified, be with the people who can really help them and be most effective in renegotiating their mortgages. And the reason why that's so important, Jane, is because, in these times of difficulty, what often happens is people who sort of take advantage, right? And so a whole cottage industry springs up around helping people, supposedly helping people, but really is just a rip-off operation.
So now you get into the whole morality issue and talking about what is our moral and ethical duty as Christians.
We had this problem, right, when you had the problem with the mortgage industry, subprime mortgages, people being put into subprime mortgages, knowing that they were unable to be able to pay their bills. And now we have a situation where people who are in difficult circumstances, once again being victimized. It's really a difficulty that it really gets to the heart of the problems in our society, which is truthfulness.
Elizabeth, you have a lot of contact with people both inside the Catholic community and outside. How do they respond to this concept of, well, we need to be more generous, but we can't afford to be more generous? I mean, what do you see going on?
Well, I'll tell you, Jay made the point that some parishes are saying we need your help too. That happened at my parish. Our priest had to come out and say, look, even before all this crisis began, we were running a $25,000 a year shortfall with the parish. We have a school, we have the soup kitchen that's open 3 nights a week. We help people learn how to write resumes. People come to us and they can't afford their oil. We've been helping them with this for years, so we're already starting at a deficit. we really need some help. We know you're suffering, but in order for us to help you, we need you to help us. If you can, give up a 7-Eleven coffee, which is $1.60 every day. You go and you buy your coffee. Can you give that to us? And if you can't give it to us every day, can you give that to us one day a week? Give it up one day a week and give it to us. If you can do that, that helps us help you. And so I think people were very responsive to it because they're thinking, yes, I'm hurting, but I can give $1. I am kind of wasteful with my money. Maybe I won't have coffee at all this week, and that will help me, but I'll give one day of that to the parish. So I think that there is a give and take there.
Mm-hmm.
At St. Rita's Church in East New York, which is one of the more depressed neighborhoods in all of New York City, the rector there, Father Nugent, is fairly new. I think they're not more than 6 or 7 months. And when he arrived, St. Rita's was relying on the diocese for about $160,000 a year. And 6 months later, they're down to about a $60,000 projection. And he will tell you with confidence that 6 months from now, they will be contributing money to the diocese and giving money to charity. It speaks to what you say, that when parishioners see that their money is going towards something constructive and they can see their money at work, whether it's painting the interior of the sanctuary or something at the school across the street, it can rally people.
If you can have a pastor, if you have someone in authority who can get everyone thinking, yes, we're all in this together, as opposed to you're the victim and we can only do so much for you, but really creating that sense of community and yes, we're all struggling together. I think it can, poor communities, there was a parish in, I think it's New Mexico, that literally built itself up from the ground. It was worshiping in a tent for 2 years, and these poor people were coming up to the pastor and they were saying, I only have this pineapple, but sell the pineapple and use it to build the church. That was an astonishing story. But now 2 years later, they have a church. They're worshiping in a church with an altar and chandeliers, and the poor can do astonishing things as long as they feel like they've got an interest.
And that's the history, certainly, of the Church in the United States, right? The history of the Church in the United States was it was built at a time where there was Great Depression, poverty, and so that's something which we should be mindful of as well. Is that sometimes when there is great adversity, the rugged individualism that seems to pervade our culture seems to tear down a little bit, and people come together to help one another.
I'm curious about something. We all have seen that there's been economic fallout from things like within the church, from things like the sex abuse scandal, that people didn't want to contribute money because they were afraid of where it's going. Do you think in a certain respect that maybe because people can now see that it's got this very immediate role, that there's an immediate effect, that maybe they're more inclined?
I think that that is the case, but I also want to be cautious here, because the fact is that in our diocese has relied very heavily on return on investment income to finance the operations of the diocese and also to finance subsidy for parishes, right? So if the diocese is relying on investment income in order to subsidize parishes, in order to run the operations of the diocese, you can imagine that when there is such a huge market decline, that has an enormous impact on our ability to do that. And for instance, that's the reason why you see the closure of schools, because it's not that the bishop is closing a school, but what he is saying is I can't afford to subsidize this anymore.
He's got to make choices.
He's got to make choices. In the diocese, incidentally, just one thing that Elizabeth was mentioning, it was funny, the diocese, one of the perks of working for the diocese was that lunch was provided every day. Now, that's a big deal for a family, right? Because you figure how much does it cost you to bring lunch every day to work. The diocese eliminated the lunch benefit for its employees because we were unable either eliminate the lunch benefit or lay people off. We eliminated the lunch benefit. It saved over $600,000 a year.
But that still costs the people that are no longer getting lunch something. Jay, we just have a short few seconds left, but I'm curious about what was, for you, perhaps the most astonishing thing you've discovered as you've looked through these budgets and this whole money issue.
I think that there is a spirit of renewal and call to stewardship that a lot of parishes haven't experienced in years. Again, Father Nugent out at St. Rita's said that for a long time we've been living in an age of of entitlement, and perhaps now this is a move back into a new age of enlightenment. So we hope it is.
Interesting concept. Jay, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, the director of a food pantry will tell us about the experience that he's had this winter, so stay with us. Welcome back. As we continue our discussion on the economy and the recession, we are joined by Anthony Butler, Director of St. John's Bread and Life, an emergency food program here in New York City, and Grant Gallicho, Associate Editor of Commonweal magazine. Thank you both for joining us.
Welcome.
Tony, what's your experience been? I'm sure there are probably a lot more people that are coming to your kitchens.
Yes, we've seen on average at our main site a 26% increase in the number of people we're serving, both in our hot meal program and in our food pantry. And interesting for social services, which provide food stamp applications, benefit applications, we've seen a 39% increase in that.
39% increase?
Yes, the number of people coming for assistance with benefits.
How on earth do you provide more assistance? That must be really hard, because I'm sure you're stretched
We're
too.
very stretched. I mean, we're 89% privately funded through contributions. So I spend a great deal of my life begging.
Sure.
But we really do depend on the charity and the response of the community to meet this need of their neighbors.
And is there an ethnic breakdown to what you're seeing in terms of the increase?
It follows the people who are hit by an economic downturn all the time. It's about 45% African American. We're seeing about the same in Latinos. And we are seeing our mobile soup kitchen, which goes to several sites in Brooklyn and Queens. We deal with an immigrant population, both Latin Day workers and also Polish women.
Do you notice any families coming forward?
We see a significant increase in families, both young families, which we think is just kind of a cyclic type of thing, and for food, because people are making the choices to pay their rent versus food and then relying on us to subsidize that. So we have seen an increase in that.
And Grant, through the magazine, I'm sure you have a lot of viewers and readers. I mean, how do you interpret these kinds of figures that we're hearing from Tony, and what does that mean for the population?
Yeah, I think it's shocking. I mean, the number of 39% that you're seeing, those are the working poor. And it seems that this is the group right now, at least according to the reading that I've done, that is being hit the hardest, which is a little different from past recessions. So, I mean, I find it very frightening. I mean, I think there is a serious domino effect here. And 2008, I don't think we've seen the bottom here. 2009 is going to be very tough.
And we're not talking about people who are worried about the percentage of loss in their 401k program. We're talking about people who are just trying to put food in their mouth.
These are the folks, of the people we serve, 58% had worked 40 hours a week. Maybe not in one job, but in a combination of jobs. And what we're seeing we're not seeing the Lehman Brothers folks. We're seeing the folks who served in the restaurants the Lehman Brothers folks did, who drove their car services, who cleaned the offices. Those are the folks that really get hit first with this kind of recession and have lost their jobs and now are relying on services like ours.
This is not like the 80s where, you know, it was the white collar jobs that were going.
Right.
And I mean, these people are the lifeblood of our economy. I mean, I don't see how New York, for example, functions if the working poor are unable to you know, go into the bloodstream of the city. It's scary.
So they deal with problems, questions of housing. You know, how do they afford housing? Affordable housing, that still has yet to moderate in New York. So housing costs are still very, very high. The cost of living is very, very high, and they're without employment and without the services to help provide them, to sustain them through a difficult downturn.
So now we go all the way full circle back to our earlier conversation about the church and how people can you know, actually still put money in the collection basket, because from what you're seeing, these are almost desperate times.
They are desperate times, though it is interesting in these desperate times, people are still generous. And I think the city is still generous, and I think the church is still generous, that they respond to the need of those immediate needs of their neighbors. Because one of the things institutions like mine provide is we are a community-based agency. We serve the community and allow that community to maintain itself. And I think it's a credit, use the example, why New York's not like Rio, another very wealthy city. But if you go to the poor sections of Rio, people are living in tin shacks. Our poor are not doing that because so many people come together and respond to that. We just had 3 church groups today volunteering today. coming in. Next week, during spring break, we'll get a lot of alternative spring break, different church groups coming in to volunteer and doing drives for us. So
do you find, are people embarrassed to come forward to say they need help? Are they embarrassed to apply for food stamps? Are they embarrassed to apply for benefits?
I think there is some element of that. We've recently built a new building and renovated a building for the purpose of showing the dignity of the people who come to us. Very much our mission statement based on a statement by Vincent de Paul that we see the face of Christ in other people. And so it's my obligation to remove that embarrassment, not theirs, to make them comfortable.
Do you think that there are, on this same theme of embarrassment, do you think there are people, there are many more out there who simply are afraid or too embarrassed to come forward?
Interesting statistic of if you take 100 people who are eligible for food stamps in this city, only 60 of them will apply. People are eligible, not just, so 40% of the people who are eligible for food stamps. New York City lost $750 million in federal money last year of food stamp money because people don't apply, because of those kind of personal hindrances.
Tony, one other question in terms of the gender breakdown. Do you find that most of the people coming to you are men, most of the people women? There seem to be some statistics that say men are more reluctant to come forward.
We see men in our hot meal program, our kind of traditional dining program. We see the women in the food pantry.
Interesting.
Is what we see, and sometimes with a lot of little kids in tow.
Grant, you were making the point earlier when we were talking beforehand about people, it's not just about giving money.
Yeah, I've just as, you know, watching the amount of TV, which I do, and that's too much, I've been noticing a lot more commercials asking for people to give of their time. I mean, somebody like me who doesn't make a ton of money, I could pinch and give more cash, but there's also time. And, you know, you can go to the Bishops' Conference website, you can find programs, you can go to a soup kitchen. There's a lot that the Catholics can do to help people in need, and it doesn't have to be cash.
And Tony, how can people come and help you? Can they can do that? I assume
they can. Yes, we had
28,000
hours of volunteer hours last year that people put in. They can go to our website www.breadandlife.org, and there's a volunteer application on there. They can contact us. We depend on volunteers.
And Father, I believe that Catholic Charities as well is another place where people can go to get some help.
That's right. If anyone's having any difficulty with paying their mortgage, if people are having difficulty paying their utility bills, if people are having trouble finding places where they can find food pantries in their local community, they can contact Catholic Charities at www.ccbq.org or call the diocese, and we'd be happy to refer them.
So I would assume that in this time and place that your role must provide for you at least a great sense of doing something.
It does. I mean, it always has. It always has. But I think I'm more touched by the people I serve. Because it should not be, here, you poor slob, you need something to eat, and I happen to have the resources to give. But this is my obligation. I tell people I'm not out to save other people's souls. I do this to save my own soul. And it is our Catholic obligation to do this kind of work.
Thank you so much, Tony, for being with us, and thank you for the work you do. Grant, I appreciate it. Thanks for your thoughts. We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more in just a moment. And we are joined again by Elizabeth Scalia for some final thoughts on what we've seen and heard today. Elizabeth, I know you've been listening to Tony Butler talking about the huge increase in the number of people that are coming to the soup kitchen and coming for help. Really startling information.
Very troubling information. His sense of mission was so impressive. And I think it's very reassuring to hear someone like him talk about people all feeling like they have some skin in the game and coming through, whether it's with time or money or whatever. I was actually very heartened listening to him, but that doesn't mean that we aren't facing some difficult times. It's just reassuring to know that someone like that is there.
And Grant, you were equally as kind of upset by the numbers as I think we all are.
Yeah, I mean, just working at the magazine, it's something we look at every day. And I'm not sure that all of our readers and everyone in the diocese, everyone in the country has really come to terms with what this could mean. I think Americans are accustomed to living pretty high on the hog. And this provides an opportunity, I mean, however tragic, for us to look in on what it is that we consume and why we consume it. So if there's one thing, I think if there's any silver lining, I mean, there is a spiritual benefit to this kind of lack.
When we talk about the lack, though, I mean, we began this program by talking about the way in which the diocese is being affected. You made the point that the diocese, like everybody else, had investments, and those investments, including the price of a piece of real estate, which the diocese owns a fair amount of, that all is resulting in the closure of schools, some parishes ultimately being closed. How bleak a situation is it?
I would say that we are in dire economic times. I think that it's clear, you know, they're not referring to it as depression, they're referring to it as a great recession. Whatever the difference is, you know, the old story is a recession is when your friend loses their job, a depression is when you lose your job. I think that a lot of people in our parishes are being affected by this. I think that there is certainly an institutional cost, but there is a much greater, I think, human cost, how people's lives are being impacted by this. And I think as a church, you know, the church is not an institutional building. It's the people of God that come together. And it is really important that we do come together at this time to let people know that they can come forward when they need help, not be ashamed when they need help, and to receive that help they need. But just tell one quick story. Yesterday I was speaking to a parishioner of mine, and I was telling you this earlier. He makes $38,000 a year. He owned a home. He ended up falling behind at his mortgage, and he's going to lose his home now. And he was in my office, and he was crying. And I could tell he did not want to cry. He was trying to hold it back, because that's not what a man does. But it was just so overwhelming. And I think that his story is not a story that's by itself. I think it's a story that's legion throughout the diocese, throughout Brooklyn and Queens, throughout our country.
But what else is the American dream but to ultimately own your own home, to have this piece of property that you can put your name on?
I think it might be time to reconfigure that dream.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that owning a home is, I mean, I rent like most young people in the city, and I don't dream of owning a home. I mean, you know, it's nice to see, you know, it's nice to have a yard and all that, but I wonder if owning a home has become a kind of totem and a kind of idol, you know, and I think it might be time to look at how we define what the American dream is.
I think this offers us a time to simplify our life, to kind of re-gauge what are the things that we need in our life. You know, when you start to think about, I have a $100 cell phone bill, I have a $100 cable bill, you know, I pay for this, I pay for that, all these conveniences of life which start to suck up a lot of our resources and demand a lot of our time. Maybe this actually is, as you said, Grant, can be actually a moment of purification. You know, we can look at this as an opportunity of crisis and destruction, or we can look at this as an opportunity to really look inside and see where is the Lord calling us in the midst of this difficulty.
But we were talking, Elizabeth, this concept of needing angels in a time like this to help you with a fuel bill that you can't pay, or something along those lines. But yet, is that way too Pollyannish and too simplistic?
I've been accused of being whimsical, but I really do think that this crisis, and it is a frightening thing for so many of us, is also a time to remind ourselves that we can have faith. We should have faith. The church should be preaching have faith, and in a very optimistic way. Because, you know, what did we read in the gospel when Jesus says, if you ask for a loaf of bread, you're not going to be given a stone? Mm-hmm. I don't think that we should be afraid to ask for help from Catholic Church, but I also think we should not be afraid to ask for help from God, who will not deny us. Jesus has promised us this. And so I think that we should have faith in helping each other, have faith to give the extra dollar in the collection plate, because I believe God will never be outdone in generosity. And so if we're generous with each other, and we're generous within our church, within our communities, and even outside the church to the people who are not church with us but are living with us in our spheres, that can only come back and be good for us too. So I think having faith and not being afraid to ask for help of each other, of the church, and of God is absolutely essential. And it's part of the American dream in the sense that it's very optimistic.
That's the story of the widow's mite, right? That it's the widow who has nothing, who gives from the little that she has, and the Lord richly blesses her. And I think that that's the case for all of us.
My own experience in life has been that God has never outdone me in generosity, not once, not yet. And I recall once being down to my last $25, living in New York, member of the working poor, and walking past some sisters who were taking alms, and I gave them the 20, kept the 5 wisely for myself, and went into an employment agency. And I got a job that day, and it wasn't a great job. It wasn't a job that got me rich. It was a job that gave me what I needed. Mm-hmm. But, you know, what we need is perhaps the mindset we need to get into a little bit, that we sometimes have more than we realize, and really, if we've got what we need, we're doing all right.
And we're going to let that, Elizabeth, be our final word. Grant, thank you so much for joining us. Elizabeth, as always. And Father Harrington, of course. And thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that you don't need a TV to watch the net. You can find us at netny.net. For all of us here, I'm Jane Hanson. I'll see you next time in the arena.